What a surprise! Facebook will team up with the state against you. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Freedom Alternative. Those of you who have been on Facebook for at least 3 years probably already know that the network has become shittier and shittier as time went on. First it was the shitty timeline, then it was the demand for a phone number, and then the demand for a government ID, which I have been avoiding so far and will delete my account once that will become unavoidable. On the speech front, Facebook has been successfully lobbied by the mostly taxpayer-funded group Women Action and the Media, WAM, to start deleting anything that contradicts the feminist orthodoxy. Now Facebook is teaming up with the German government to combat anti-refugee hate speech. That is to say, to delete anyone who has the audacity to express dangerous thoughts such as keeping Europe European, or asking why is the responsibility of Europe to take in millions upon millions of kebabs whom we owe nothing anyway. The Verge reports, quote, Facebook this week said it will work with the German government to crack down on hate speech and xenophobia online, following calls from the country's justice minister to do more to combat hateful speech about refugees. As the Wall Street Journal reports, Facebook will work with Germany's Ministry of Justice, internet service providers, and other social networks to form a task force aimed at flagging and removing hateful content more quickly. Facebook also pledged to help finance organizations that track online hate speech, though the company did not say it would change its policy on what types of content are considered offensive. Last month, Germany's Ministry of Justice criticized Facebook for not doing more to police hate speech, alleging that the social network reacts faster to remove sexual imagery than it does racist images. German Justice Minister Heiko Maas announced the creation of the online task force after meeting with Facebook in Berlin on Monday. The local Germany explains even further to us simpletons, quote, the company's measures include signing up with the Voluntary self-censorship service provider, FSM, a group Facebook describes as a leading organization in the realm of internet security, and setting up a task force to find solutions to the problem of racism on the internet. The third step the US-based company announced was the implementation of a campaign for counter-speech in Germany, jargon which means fighting xenophobia through discussion and informed criticism rather than deletion of offensive posts. The Voluntary self-censorship service? Gee, not even the Bolsheviks thought about that. I mean, voluntary self-censorship was implied back in communism, but never actually codified. Fucking hell. Look, a while ago, I asserted in a video that Germany has the most totalitarian laws and practices known to man in Europe when it concerns the internet. That assertion of mine upset some Germans, but the fact of the matter is that my assertion is entirely true and is being proven again by this move. Now, on one hand, there is this argument that Facebook is a private company and as such they get to delete whatever they please from their platform. Now, that's entirely true and I'm in full agreement with that argument, but what we have here is the collusion with the state, and that, my friends, is a very huge issue. Once the collusion occurs, Facebook no longer deletes whatever it wants, but whatever the state says it needs to go. And that is a violation of one's free speech. Not that this matters too much, since Germany does not really have free speech. Seriously, it doesn't. The absurd punishments for a Roman salute and other Nazi-related speech offenses are world-renowned, but those aren't the only speech offenses in Germany. The list of things banned in Germany is actually quite long. For instance, Section 184 from the Federal Criminal Code of Germany bans the dissemination of pornographic writings. Section 90 bans the disparagement of the president. Section 103 bans the insult to organs and representatives of foreign states. Section 166 bans the insulting of faiths, religious societies, and organizations dedicated to a philosophy of life if they could disturb public peace. And the list of these such bullshit offenses goes on and on. I'm thinking, how did this apply when the West Germans were insulting Honecker back before the Berlin Wall had fallen? Now, admittedly, some of these bans aren't exactly enforced, but that's besides the point. The fact that they are on the books is a problem in and of itself, because right now it provides leeway for the state to remove anything it pleases just to protect the precious little feelings of the invader. Sorry, I mean refugees, of course. The fact of the matter is that all these hate speech regulations, laws, and policies are utterly nonsensical. There is no such thing as hate speech, in an objective manner anyway. The application of these policies and laws should convince everyone with two brain cells to rub together that this is indeed the case. In the Netherlands, a politician of a mainstream political party, no less, Mr. Geert Wilders, was told in court that it doesn't matter whether what he said about Muslims is true or not. What it matters is that it's hate speech. On Facebook, posts quoting stats from the CDC about male victimization and female perpetration have been deleted because, it's hate speech to show that most of the child killers, for instance, are women. It may be true, but it's hate speech. In Britain, quoting stats about homosexuals and HIV may get you into trouble if you don't sugarcoat it enough. Heck, a guy was arrested for calling a horse gay in Britain. Now, many would say that these hate speech laws are just the progressive incarnation of the old blasphemy laws, but they're actually worse than that. At least the blasphemy laws had the Index Librorum Prohibitorium, and you knew exactly what was banned and what wasn't. With these hate speech bullshit regulations, you only find out in court or when your speech is being censored. Heck, even back in communism, the speech regulations made a little bit more sense. They were absolutely idiotic, but at least they made sense. There were clear guidelines of what is not allowed and what is allowed, and you had a censorship committee that would review the work and explain to you what was wrong with it, and also show you how you should change it in order to meet the criteria. These hate speech laws really don't have any of these, which makes them far, far, far worse than the communist speech guidelines and the blasphemy laws. And not only they're worse, but they're also far more hypocritical. Because you see, the blasphemy laws and the communist speech guidelines did not exist in regimes that purported to protect the free expression of ideas. In other words, they existed in a far more honest context. More brutal and more totalitarian, sure, but at least honest. Look, you're not free, you will do as you're told, or you'll go to the Gulag or to the Inquisition. The terms were as clear as they could get. Now, what can you do against such reckless idiocy? Well, if you're not a news junkie like me, you're probably better off leaving Facebook altogether. Heck, even I am willing to do that if they require me a government ID. There's no way I'm scanning my passport and submit it to anyone. Fuck you! Who the hell do you think you are? Another step is to start using alternative platforms that censors less. And yes, they do exist. Twitter, with all its faults, censors far less than Facebook. Although when it does, it tends to be idiotic as hell, but that's a different story. Yet another step is to start learning the old ways of communication. Internet Relay Chat, IRC, is a good place to start. For instance, I am willing to host channels on my IRC server for free. I have done that in the past, too, with very sensitive communication. Unlike mainstream networks, my IRC server is subjected to no authority. Seriously, if you're interested in that, drop me a line. But perhaps the most important step you could and should take is to start being more concerned about your privacy online. Because at the end of the day, there is a likely possibility, if you're living in Western Europe, that you will be facing legal challenges for un-PC speech online. Or you could move to Eastern Europe, where no one really cares. But I realize that's not really an option for most people. Anyway, to sum up, Facebook is no longer a private entity, but a tool of the state. What you do with that information is up to you, but you should be aware of the risks that come with that information. Just saying. And with that being said, don't forget to subscribe, follow me on Twitter at FreedomAlternate, and consider supporting this channel. Thanks for watching.